One day, a gate opened and terrifying monsters called the Neighbors started pouring in, terrorizing the city of Mikado in Japan. The government waged war against the creatures but eventually lost due to power and technological differences. Just when everyone thought it was all over, a group of mysterious warriors appeared and started taking down the invading monsters one by one, turning the tide of the battle. Peace was eventually restored, and later, the group of warriors established a base in the middle of the city, the Border Defense Agency. The base is humanity's sword and shield against the invading monsters, with border agents as its soldiers. 4 years later, a 15-year-old high school student Osamu Makumo is just living his normal life when things start to flip upside down. After saving the foreign exchange student, Yuma Kuga, from the bullies, he gets beaten up. But things will snowball from bad to worst as for some unexplained reason, a giant black hole opens and Akezu appears, giving Osamu a new side quest to survive. Yuma tells Osamu to let their classmates become monster food. But Osamu's lawful good attitude prevents him from letting his classmates become a neighbor's dinner. So, Osamu activates his trigger, transforming into his C-rank border agent threat. He summons Raygust, his weapon, and starts doing some hero-level stuff. He rushes towards his classmate's aid and leaps into the air to do the weakest damage I've ever seen in an anime show. But his attack saves his classmate as the monster loses its grip. But it's time for the monster's counterattack. The neighbor sends Osamu flying next to a wall. Just as the monster is about to kill Osamu, Yuma swoops in and saves Osamu from being sent to the Shadow Realm. Yuma absolutely destroys the monster in one hit. Yuma asks if Osamu's alright, which reminds him of the time someone saved him from a neighbor a few years prior. Osamu gets his composure back and introduces himself. Yuma walks up to him and tells him that even with the trigger, a literal power boost, Osamu's power is trash. With the trigger knowledge, Osamu assumes that Yuma's a border agent. But Yuma reveals that he doesn't work for the border. In fact, he's a neighbor himself, explaining that his trigger was his father's. After the fight, Yuma walks away casually, but Osamu chases after him, literally confused by Yuma's statement. But Yuma differentiates himself from the regular border punching bags, like the Trian soldier that spawned earlier, and actual neighbors, who are quite like humans. He tells Osamu that there's also a diverse selection of people back beyond the gate. That night, Osamu walks together with Yuma trying to comprehend his statement earlier, monologuing his way into a reasonable conclusion. Yuma, however, becomes hungry and invites him to eat, literally flashing 1,000,000 yen like tissue paper out of a box. This attracts many goons, following them to extort money from them. Yuma dispatches them, but Osamu is really worried about Yuma's tendency to break a Japanese person's legs, so he tells Yuma to stay put. Osamu arrives later only to find out that Yuma beats the absolute living thief out of these goons, and the two share some tasty fast food dinner. Osamu tells Yuma that he shouldn't go too far, like dislocating a joint or two because it's the rules. But Yuma responds by telling him that rules won't protect anyone from harm, only the order. But Osamu still makes a stand that rules are to be followed, and so Yuma complies by asking Osamu to tell him the rules. The next day, while having their lunch on the rooftop, another monster gate appears, and this time around, it's literally outside the Forbidden Zone, which is supposed to contain said gates. The school teachers quickly evacuate the students, but before all of them can get to safety, these large lices appear to slice some students apart. Luckily, Osamu is there to save the day. Osamu activates his trigger and transforms into his border patrol mode. However, Yuma stops him. He tells Osamu that fighting the neighbors, especially with his current ability, will result in certain death. Yuma tells him that he needs to wait for border agents to arrive first. But Osamu reasons out that the base is too far from the school, and students' lives are at stake. And so Osamu leaps into action and attacks the neighbors, trapping his classmates. He cuts one of the neighbor's limbs and pushes it out of the window. After dealing with the first one, Osamu rushes to strike the next neighbor down, telling his classmates to retreat higher to safety. Osamu thinks to himself that he can handle the neighbor, unfortunately. Immediately after releasing its extra limbs, the neighbor sends Osamu flying. But Osamu doesn't back down and starts charging forward, which turns out to be a big mistake. The neighbor quickly slices off his left arm, while releasing another set of limbs. Although Osamu manages to dodge 3 of the neighbor's attacks, the next attack pierces his suit, causing him to revert back to his human form. With his trigger suit disintegrated, Osamu is a sitting duck. The monster didn't waste any time and attacked him. But luckily for him, Yuma was watching him all along, activating a shield that protects him from the attack. He then tells Osamu that he'll borrow his trigger, transforming into his very own border agent attire. Osamu warns Yuuma that his trigger is different and that he'll die if he uses that. But Yuuma tells him that he warned him a few minutes ago, but he also didn't listen to him. The monster starts attacking, but Yuuma keeps deflecting its attack, dulling the trigger's blade. Osamu tells Yuuma that what he's using is a training dagger, but with Yuuma's expertise, the blade becomes a hot knife cutting through butter. Another one attacks from the windows, but Yuuma deflects it rather easily, making quick work of the monster in a single attack. Yuuma gives back Osamu's trigger. Osamu wonders why Yuuma makes use of the training dagger better than most rank agents. And Replica, Yuuma's chaperone, explains that the trigger comes from the biological energy source called Trian. Replica also explains that Trian comes from an invisible organ called the Trian gland. Humans possess Trians, just like the neighbors, but the difference is that the neighbors use them more effectively compared to anyone outside the gate. After the lore explanation, Yuuma tells Osamu to follow his plan, which is to let Osamu take the credit for dealing with the neighbors to protect Yuuma's identity as a neighbor. Osamu and Yuuma come out of the scene unscathed, and Osamu quickly becomes a campus celebrity after Yuuma makes him the center stage. A few minutes later, the Arashiyama squad of the rank border agents arrive at the scene only to find out that the neighbors have been dealt with already. The captain asks who defeated the monsters, and Yuuma urges Osamu to take the credit for defeating the alien invaders. Although Osamu thinks he's going to get court-martialed for disobeying orders and acting on his own, the captain congratulates and expresses his gratitude, especially for taking care of his little brother and sister. However, Kidora Ai, an elite member of the squad, tells her captain that what Osamu did is a punishable act and he must be sent to HQ for punishment. Although the captain agrees with her, he assures Osamu that his punishment isn't going to be severe as thanks for keeping his siblings unharmed. Later that day, Kidora Ai waits for Osamu outside the school and escorts him to the HQ. She tells Osamu that she came for him to watch him. Curious by the neighbor's unusual spawn locations, Osamu asks her how come a neighbor appeared outside the Forbidden Zone, and Kidora responds that it's happening all over the town, not just in the school. Apparently, the guidance beacon is supposed to attract these gates, but gates are appearing randomly. The reason is unknown, even to the border defense itself. A few minutes later, and a new type of neighbor appears, an Ilger, a flying type neighbor that can rain down bombs, pretty much just like the Kirov from Red Alert 2. Kidora tells Osamu that she'll go and Osamu accompanies her. The two activate their trigger, but due to the damage that Osamu had taken earlier this morning, he isn't able to summon his weapon, and so Osamu quickly changes professions, from a neighbor-slashing border agent into a friendly neighborhood borderman. As soon as Osamu comes into action, Yuuma gives him a clone of Replica, a two-way radio that he can use to communicate with Yuuma just in case he gets himself in a pinch. Osamu quickly gets to work and starts helping people trapped in buildings and other places. In doing so, he earns the gratitude and praise of the people. Meanwhile, Kidora solos the Ilger and manages to defeat it. However, the Ilger enters its final phase, a suicide run into a populated area. With Yuuma's help, the Ilger falls into the river and explodes underwater with 0 casualties. After the Ilger was eliminated, the residents who were saved by Osamu flood him with compliments and praise. But being the goody two-shoes he is, he immediately redirects all the efforts back to Kidora, who had just arrived at the scene. But the reality is, not everyone's impressed. Some of the residents' houses and businesses were destroyed during the attack, and a lot of irate residents are also swarming Osamu. But Kidora takes over and reassures the residents that they're going to be properly compensated. Osamu thanks Kidora, and Yuuma tells him that the border will have to deal with the abnormal gates. Before the day is over, both Kidora and Osamu travel back to HQ to report, and mostly do the paperwork because of how they acted on their own. Osamu enters the room and another border agent comes along with him. Jin Yuichi, the S-Class, Power Elite Border Agent. Osamu recognizes him but thinks Jin doesn't remember him. The meeting starts and pretty much there are the pigs who want Osamu punished for being rational and actually saving people without asking for permission to do so. But there were also others who wants him to be recognized for his efforts, suggesting him to be promoted to rank 3, to be enlisted in the official roster of regular agents. With the threat of the abnormal gates opening randomly outside the Forbidden Zone, the Ministry tasks Jin to take over the operation and spearhead it himself. He said he's going to take Osamu with him because he thinks his involvement with the recent gate openings is the key to solving the problem. The next day, Osamu waits for Jin to fetch him and start the operation. Jin tells him to come along, saying he knows someone who might know something about the gates. Arriving at the exclusion zone, they see Yuuma, who just finished investigating. Jin introduces himself and so does Yuuma. Jin immediately asks Yuma if he's a neighbor, which surprises both Osamu and Yuma. Trying to avoid arrest, Yuma backoffs cautiously, but Jin tells him he knows a couple of neighbors as well and has been in and out of the gates himself, which reassures Yuma. Jin tells them he asked because his side effect tells him something about them. When asked about it, Jin tells them that he can see the future. Yuma tells them that they found the cause and it's basically these scorpion drones that are hiding everywhere, trying to siphon Trian energy from humans and border agents to summon gates. With this information, Jin immediately sets out for the base and tells everyone what to do, and after a couple of hours, the operation is a success. After the operation, Osamu immediately gets promoted to B rank class, removing the weapon and trigger restrictions. The next day Osamu is supposed to meet with both Yuma and Chica, but they are not in the same location. He runs off to the exclusion zone and finds a giant neighbor attacking the ruined city part. After the clone informs him that Yuma's in the area, Osamu quickly transforms into his newbie class suit and pursues the monster. He calls the attention of the neighbor and the monster turns to him, firing a projectile, which Osamu dodges. Osamu keeps dodging the neighbor's attack, baiting it to give him an opening, allowing him to take it down with ease, while also closing the gap between. The neighbor finally fires a destructive projectile at Osamu, but misses him, which he uses to activate his power, Asteroid. He fires multiple barrages of low-damage projectiles, which damages the monster's weak spot and follows it up by activating his thrusters, propelling him forward, which he uses to accelerate the momentum and power of his attack, killing the monster and marking the first time he kills a neighbor without any help. Osamu finally has the time to introduce Yuma to Chica, a person that Osamu's trying to protect. Osamu tells him that Chica's been targeted by neighbors for quite a long time, even before the border established their base. Yuma tells him that the reason why Chica's being targeted is probably due to her holding some good amount Trian, which is the source of energy in Osamu and his world. After analyzing both Osamu and Chica's Trian amount, they find out that Chica's Trian reserves are exceptionally high, making her a primary target. However, the assassins sent by the Border Defense Agency arrive and poses to attack Chica, but Yuma tells them he's the neighbor, and immediately after confirming he is, the captain immediately fires a shot. Yuma transforms into his trigger mode and faces off the spear guy who surprise attacks him. He manages to dodge him, but the spear guy reveals he couldn't dodge and got him. Osamu quickly asks for help from Jin, but Jin tells him it's okay since Yuma's about to be class agents. Yuma tries to dodge every of the spear guy's attacks, but still gets somehow hit. Another guy joins to attack him, but he blocks it with his Trian shield. When he's cornered, he uses his skill to jump but is shot by a sniper. Luckily, with his quick reactions, he manages to dodge and only manages to lose an arm. One of the guys starts shooting Yuma, who tries to block him with his Trian shield, but the bullets pass through it and hit his body. Its bullets convert Trian into weights and restrain Yuma. The two guys jump to attack Yellow, but he copies the skill and uses the same projectiles to restrain both guys and then they fight. After the fight, Jin appears to introduce himself and so does Chica. Jin tells the agents that the reason they lost is because of Yuma's trigger, which is a special case, a black trigger. Osamu asks Replica what a black trigger is, and Replica explains to him that it's a special trigger that is made by high-level Trian users. Since Yuma's trigger is his late father's, it probably means that 90% of Yuma's power comes from the trigger itself. After the fight, the captain immediately bails out of the zone, while Jin escorts the remaining agents away. Since Yuma's doesn't have Earth's common sense, Osamu tells Chica to take care of Yuma for him. Osamu quickly leaves the scene to report back to HQ. Arriving at the base, Jin reported that the neighbor that Osamu's been suspected of hiding is actually a black trigger user, and so the head of the ministry tells them to kill the neighbor, which is Yuma, and retrieve the black trigger from him. But Jin asks them the most important question: what if a black trigger...
And I'm pretty sure that you are